Excited anticipation mixed with some trepidation had me tossing and turning all night, ensuring sleep was as elusive as hen's teeth. While I lay awake staring through the dark, visionless up at the ceiling, Blake, my boyfriend of 2 years, was almost comatose and snoring by my side. With an angry frown, I also realised he was getting louder with each passing minute, which only increased my annoyance. With an impatient sigh, I reached out with my right hand and poked his uncovered shoulder with my index finger. He released a snort before his snores quietened, for all of about 5 minutes. I was thankful he hadn't had too many beers to drink last night. If he had, I would have slept in the spare room to avoid his hot temper and his transformation of Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde personality. But he had had enough beers that it made him snore like a damn freight train rattling down the tracks. I reached out my right arm again and put the heel of my palm against the round of his bare shoulder, shoving him hard enough that I rocked his listless body forward and almost tipped him to lie on his stomach. Oh, thank God! His snoring finally stopped. Leaning up on one elbow, I looked over him and glanced at the red glowing digital numbers on the alarm clock on the top of his bedside cabinet. With a quiet but irritated groan, I fell back down on the bed, slamming the back of my head into the pillow. It was no use trying to get any bloody sleep now. My alarm was due to go off in just over 45 minutes. I lay on my back and brought my arms up, tucking my hands in underneath my head until the dawn of another day began to lighten the room with the first soft orange and yellow glow of sunrise. With an exasperated sigh, I threw the covers off and swung my legs out of bed, taking a minute to sit on the edge of the mattress to calm the nervous butterflies that were beginning to stir in my stomach. Starting a new job is always a daunting prospect. After 5 years in the same dreary office, sitting in the same uncomfortable desk, as assistant to almost as many CEOs, my working life had become stagnant and I decided it was time for a change of scenery. While I was scrolling through all the employment agencies online, a position for a personal assistant at a prestigious modelling agency caught my eye. On a whim, I submitted my application and resume to the elite Sublime Elegance Modelling Agency, rolling my eyes into the back of my head once I'd sent it. What an idiot. There's no way you're going to get it, just look at you. I put the fact that I'd applied to the back of my mind and concentrated on submitting my resume for positions I knew I had a good chance of securing for the rest of the week. When a lady called Christine phoned to advise me I had an interview to attend at Sublime Elegance, I was totally gobsmacked. I hadn't realistically expected to hear from anyone at all. And no one was more surprised than me when I received the call from Christine about a week later offering me the position of personal assistant to the CEO and owner, Jackson Connors. It was even more surprising when I heard myself eagerly accepting it. Although my credentials and experience were exceptional, I was still mystified with being offered the role. I was of the opinion they should have offered it to someone who would stunningly represent their agency, not the mousy girl next door type that I considered myself to be. Although, according to Blake, I was more in the category of ugly duckling. He was always reminding me I should be thankful that I had him. He'd pointed out on many occasions that no one else would want me. I sure as hell wasn't model material, I knew that much. With a weary sigh, I got up off the bed and padded to the bathroom for a shower, still trying to stem the nervous flutter inside my stomach. Once I finished and stepped out, the fluttering inside gathered strength, making me feel a little nauseous. After drying myself off, and with the towel tucked in over my breast sarong style, I stood in front of the large wall mirror glaring at my reflection. The sleepless night had left me with darkened bags under my eyes, which I thankfully knew how to disguise with the aid of carefully applied makeup. Then I did what I always did when I was confronted by my reflected image, which was something I tried to avoid doing most of the time. I assessed the image staring back at me. All I saw were the imperfect flaws that Blake constantly pointed out to me. Lips that were too naturally full they looked collagen-filled. A nose that was straight but too thin and long for my face. Ugly little mole above the left side of my upper lip. Sky blue eyes that were way too big and framed by too long and too thick jet black lashes. Then there were my ginormous boobs. The bathroom door swung open, startling me, and I prepared myself, my spine automatically stiffening. Speak of the devil.
"Morning, duckling,"
Blake mumbled, and I grimaced internally, but was careful not to physically shrink with distaste. Today wasn't a good day to instigate an abusive argument. I hate that damn nickname. I kept my eyes averted from his and began to apply my makeup while he reached in and turned the shower on. I could feel his eyes on me while he waited for the water to heat.
You're not going to last the week.
He snorted, and my spine stiffened even further.
God only knows how the fuck you landed that job, Ducky. Just look at you.
He stated insultingly. I am, I thought morosely. There's yet another dent in what little of my self-confidence I had left. Despite his derogatory comments, I took the time to ensure the application of my makeup was flawless. Blake finally emerged from the shower just as I was putting the finishing touches on my lips.
You think putting all that war paint of yours on is going to make that much of a difference?
He laughed malevolently. I clenched my jaw tight to prevent my sarcastic comeback from emerging in retaliation. I stared at him from my reflection in the mirror and watched his eyes travel over my semi-naked body.
At least you've got a pretty hot body. That's one consolation, I suppose. Except for those ridiculously big tits of yours. What a fucking waste.
He mused absently to himself while he rubbed his towel over his head, drying his short-cropped blonde hair.
You know, Dux, you really need to look at getting a breast reduction.
He quickly rubbed the towel over his body before he casually threw it on the floor when he was finished. It landed in a heap down underneath the towel rail, and he sauntered out of the bathroom without a backward glance. With an angry huff, I leaned down and snatched up the damp towel and hung it over the rail. Messy prick, I'm not your fucking slave. While I was brushing my thick brunette hair, I decided to add a bit of extra body to it and plugged in the curling iron. Halfway through, Blake threw open the bathroom door with a loud thud as it hit the wall behind it.
I'm off.
He boomed through the doorway before he closed the door again without waiting for my acknowledgement. I suppose I should be thankful he actually told me he was leaving. With my hair now falling in soft waves framing my face and halfway down my back, I sprayed liberally with the hairspray so it stayed that way. After pulling the towel from around me, I hung it up next to Blake's on the rail before I went to get dressed. I chose a dark grey knitted form-fitting dress with faint white horizontal stripes and a matching pale pink with black lace bra and thong set to wear underneath. The hem sat halfway down my thighs, low enough to cover the lace band at the top of the black thigh highs I decided to wear at the last minute. Slipping my feet into a pair of black stilettos, I picked up my bag and slung the thin strap over my shoulder, skipping down the flight of stairs. I locked the front door behind me and made my way down to the bus stop, trying to dispel Blake's uncomplimentary words from my head. While I waited for the bus with a couple of other professional-looking men and one rather unusually clothed, tall and skinny, goth-looking teenage boy, with makeup almost as impeccable as my own, I tried really hard not to stare at. I recalled my original interview. Tall, gorgeous, blonde. A woman by the name of Christine had conducted the interview. I hadn't been afforded the opportunity of meeting the man who was now going to be my boss. He'd apparently been in another state meeting with prospective clients, so the lovely blonde informed me. She hadn't offered up any further information about him, and I had no idea what to expect. I should have done some research on him. Too late for that now, idiot. So much for being intelligent. After I paid for my ticket and took a seat behind the driver for the short bus ride to the train station, my nerves kicked it up a notch. Starting a new job almost feels exactly like when I started my very first day at high school. My palms started to feel clammy, and the black ink from the ticket clutched tightly between my fingers started to bleed onto my skin. I opened up the cover of my cell phone and inserted the ticket in one of the little pockets, ready to produce it at the turnstiles on arrival at the train station to gain entry to the platforms. Jesus, I feel sick. When I accepted the job, I did a dry run on the train and knew just how long it would take for me to get there. But I'd left earlier, just in case something happened to waylay me. The last thing I wanted was to be late on my first day. I was so thankful I lived near a station that was one of the first on the line. I knew I was guaranteed a seat in the almost empty carriage in the morning. But by the time the 6 carriage train made it halfway to the city, the car I was in was packed to bursting. And when the doors finally slid open to let everyone off at my destination, it took longer for me to get off with all the rush hour commuters that had been sandwiched in like tin soldiers side by side. Finally, I found myself standing completely in awe in the windy tunnel of St George's Terrace, staring at the front entrance of Central Park, the tallest building in the city with 51 floors, constructed with steel and curtained walls of aluminium and glass, an architectural delight with all its triangles. The dominating building housed the modelling agency, along with many other various businesses, and my heart was really beginning to beat wildly against my ribs. Nervously teetering in my black stilettos, I walked with way more confidence than I felt through the automated glass sliding doors on the ground floor. Inhaling and exhaling with measured precision kept me as calm as possible, with a cyclone worthy of a Category 5 rating spinning around inside my stomach. I approached the bank of elevators to join the sea of people already waiting. Jesus Christ, how many people work in this damn building? When 2 bells sounded, almost instantaneously, indicating the arrival of 2 cars, the swarm of professionals who had filled the foyer surged forward, rapidly filling the empty cars once the 2 pairs of doors slid open. I rocked my head back and forth like I was at an Australian Open tennis match, watching in disbelief while I observed them all pile in until there was absolutely no standing room for anyone else to possibly squeeze in on either one of them. I'd arrived 20 minutes early, so I hung back and decided to wait for the next one. Is everyone in this building always so damned impatient? There was no way I wanted to be squashed like a sardine in a tin can on my first day. When both sets of doors finally closed, I breathed a small sigh of relief and reached out to push the up button to summon another car with a contented grin on my face. I was totally absorbed in my own thoughts when the ding of another elevator sounded, capturing my attention. I waited while another pair of doors began to slide open. With a grateful breath, I walked inside and turned around, gently pushing the 43rd floor button, lighting it up with a cheerful smile on my face while I spared a thought for all the sardines in the previous cars. I was the only occupant in this one, and I looked around at all the space around me. The doors began to slide closed, and I heard a deeply sensual baritone voice yell out with some urgency,
Hold the elevator!
Instinctively, my immediate reaction was to stick my hand in between the almost closed doors, and they reopened, bouncing off my hand. I wrapped my fingers around the width of one door, keeping them open while a vision of perfection dressed impeccably in a grey suit raced in. He was wearing a striking blue shirt that resembled the blue of the most perfect cloudless sky, and a tie the colour of the deep ocean. His enticing aromatic aftershave wafted temptingly under my nose when I let go of the door and took a step back while they softly closed. My mouth watered, and I was shocked with my body's very unfamiliar response. I had to discreetly swallow a few times over before my mouth dried out again. I kept my gaze averted, ashamed of my body's immediate reaction to the sexy and handsome stranger, while my stomach dropped from the commencing ascent of the car.
Thank you, miss.
He paused, waiting expectantly for my reply. My biggest mistake was turning around to look at him. I couldn't help the automatic evaluation of his attractive athletic frame, from the tip of his neatly cut short black hair down over his axe-width broad shoulders to his wide solid chest, further south over his trim waist, his thick thighs, and onward to the tip of his shiny black shoes and back again. He was hotness personified. An alluring picture of him would certainly appear under the words heartthrob typed into Google Images, and my heart rate spiked. Ali, I automatically offered the shortened version of my name while my face heated. Alison Walker, I corrected lamely. His perfectly shaped brow quirked quickly upward for a brief second, as if he recognised my name, but then he smiled so intoxicatingly my heart skipped a beat while my mind went completely blank, devoid of any thought at all. I glanced down in surprise at the hand he extended out to me.
Jack,
he offered smoothly in a mesmerising tone. I felt the beat of my heart in the side of my neck when I extended my hand. I tried to stem the slight tremor of nervousness to shake to our informal and impromptu introduction. My heart went into overdrive when his long, strong fingers wrapped around mine, and an electric bolt of awakening lust sparked through me at the warmth of his firm touch, shooting straight down to the apex between my legs. My thighs involuntarily clenched together, and once again I was blown away with my body's reaction, while all the breath temporarily left my lungs. Jesus! Moisture gathered between the bare lips of my pussy, and a deep throb started up behind my clit. When I remembered to breathe again, my heartbeat ratcheted up a few notches, and I knew my blood pressure was rising quickly, catching up. My breath grew even shallower, and I stood rooted to the spot with ever-widening eyes while I watched him raise my hand up, my small fingers almost disappearing when encircled in his large, tightening grip. My lungs refused to work at all when his lips gently but sensuously touched against the back of my hand, while his compelling cyan green eyes never left mine. When his lips touched against my skin, the moisture between my thighs increased and the throb behind my clit pounded with building excitement. I had never experienced such a sensual and erotic kiss in my entire life, let alone one placed on the back of my hand. My first cognitive thought, once my brain decided to function again, was what a gentleman he was. I'd always thought they were a myth, an extinct breed. I'd never met one before, ever. His hold on my hand was lasting entirely too long and was wreaking havoc through my already somersaulting stomach, not to mention accelerating the amount of warmth and moisture in the area between my legs. I nervously pulled out of his grip while heat increased through my face, and I lowered my eyes to the floor of the elevator. The space I had gleefully enjoyed a few moments ago now seemed to be stifling and suffocating, and I shuffled restlessly to the furthest side of the car. His presence was unnervingly overpowering. I flicked a glance up to see what floor we'd reached and almost released a groan of disappointment when I saw the car had only travelled up to level 8. I still had another 35 floors to endure, trapped inside a confined space with sexy, hotter-than-hell Jack before I reached my destination. It was only when my eyes were returning down to the floor that I realised he hadn't pressed a floor number, and my brows creased slightly. I risked a quick glance in his direction, then wished I hadn't when I saw he was quite comfortably checking me out. The heat prickling ever higher through my cheeks increased, radiating off me like a heater, making me feel all hot and bothered. I didn't think there was going to be enough oxygen left inside the car for me to make it to the 43rd level the way I was sucking in every available bit with the way I was panting. Jesus Christ! At this rate I was likely to collapse from asphyxiation before the car stopped. I shifted nervously from one foot to the other and adjusted the thin strap of my little handbag on my shoulder, trying in vain to calm myself down. What a great first impression I'm going to make. Red-faced and panting heavily as if I've just climbed the entire 43 floors up the stairs instead of riding up in the damned elevator. Maybe Blake's right, but his timing might be out. I may not last the day, let alone the week. When I glanced back up to see what floor we'd reached, I groaned inwardly. 10 more floors. I was so damn flustered I began wringing my clasped hands in front of me and chewing on the inside of my bottom lip, and hotness personified still hadn't pressed a button. Then a sudden realisation hit me and I mentally slapped the palm of my hand against my forehead. Of course, he's probably one of the models at the agency. He definitely looks like one. He's undoubtedly well sought after too, with his insanely steamy presence. The ding sounded, alerting me that I'd finally reached my desired floor, and I breathed a quietly enormous sigh of relief when the elevator came to a gentle halt, dropping my stomach once again before the doors slid open. This is it. Hotness personified swept his arm gallantly out in front of him toward the now open doors with a seductive and disarming smile on his face.
After you, Miss Walker.
His perfectly shaped and well-proportioned lips stretched so beguilingly it unsettled me, so much that I almost tripped over the lip of the car on my way through the doorway when I exited into the plush offices. I was extremely aware of his potent presence following closely behind me. If the prickles on the back of my neck were any indication, he was too damn close. I could practically feel his heated breath caressing across my dampened nape, and an unexpected tingling shiver of desire feathered down the length of my spine. I silently thanked God that I wouldn't have to be working too closely with any of the models. I think if I did, I think Mr. Hotness would mess with my head as well as my heart rate and blood pressure. I knew I was to be meeting Mr. Jackson Connors on my arrival. During the phone call the lovely Christine had made offering me the position, she had informed me he was the person who would outline what job expectation I was required to meet in the post I had accepted. My job was to be his right-hand woman. With excited anticipation, I approached the gorgeous Christine sitting elegantly behind her classy, black-lacquered curved desk with a shaky smile gracing my lips, opening my mouth ready to ask for Mr. Connors. But she beat me to it, her gaze fixating over my right shoulder. "Good morning, Mr. Connors. The day's bookings are already on your desk along with your coffee." Fuck! I nearly died 1,000 deaths before I heard his sexually seductive voice croon my name from behind me.
This way, Miss Walker. What an exceptional start to see if you've arrived ahead of time.
He grinned commandingly and raised one brow. Oh, God. Hotness personified is my fucking boss? Jack? Oh, shit. He must have said Jax. I'm not even going to last the hour, let alone the day. I prayed with all my might that I was going to have my own office space, because if I had to share any space with Mr. Jackson devastatingly handsome Connors, there is absolutely no way I was going to be able to concentrate on any task whatsoever. While I followed his tempting and sexy physique down the corridor, I was ashamed of myself for the furtive glances I kept making at his decidedly tight arse. My face fired up even further when I envisioned what that arse would feel like beneath the palm of my hand. Oh my God, get a grip, Ellie. What the hell is wrong with me? My heart fell like a lead balloon inside my chest when I followed him through the door of what I decided was his office. It was huge, but it contained 2 desks. Oh, fuck no. I had a sneaky suspicion I was going to have to share office space with Mr. Hotness. He walked up to the larger of the 2 desks and placed one hand firmly on the back of one of the 2 chairs, pulling it slightly away from the desk.
Take a seat, Miss Walker.
Does he really have to say my name so delightfully? I almost groaned with frustrated arousal, but fought hard to keep it from coming out of my mouth while I attempted to sit on the sturdy seat. He surprised me by sliding the chair in underneath me, and I glanced up in astonishment while I breathlessly thanked him for his chivalrous act. That simple action was yet another first for me. No man had ever seated me like that before. But now I was well aware of the abundant amount of moisture that had gathered between my thighs on the trip up in the elevator. Holy shit! I don't think I've ever been so aroused before just by simply being in a man's company. My eyes were trained on him while he walked around his large desk and rolled the high-backed leather chair away from the edge. When he eased himself onto the seat, he rolled back in, but not all the way under. The amused twinkle in his eye and the slightly wicked grin pulling at his lips as he sat across from me didn't help with my predicament. I had an urgent desire to clear my suddenly dry throat.
Do I make you nervous, Miss Walker?
His baritone resonance washed pleasantly through my ears. I squirmed a little on the seat of my chair, and my face began to heat yet again when that action only highlighted the slickness gathered between the bared lips of my pussy. I crossed my legs and clenched my thighs together, almost jolting with the gentle pulse of pleasure when I did, while I mentally debated with myself over whether I was going to lie or tell the truth. Truth won. A little, I admitted quietly with an acknowledging nod.
I seem to have that effect on women, so I've been told.
Does his voice always sound so deep and seductively sexy? I hope not, because it is damn distracting. In fact, the man as a whole is damn distracting. He started talking, advising me of his expectations, and I did try and concentrate, I really did. But I think I only caught every 4th word, because when his lips were moving, the only thought inside my head was how wonderfully erotic they'd feel travelling over the heated surface of my skin. Where the hell are these thoughts coming from? Concentrate, Alison! Anger was starting to build inside me, at myself. I was normally so professionally in control, but I felt like I was drowning in his presence. Thank God Christine's articulately sweet voice chose that moment to interrupt through the intercom, advising Mr. Connors that someone by the name of Montana was on the line for him. An immediate scowl creased his handsome features, and he excused himself before he picked up the receiver of his desk phone. I tuned out, cheerfully taking the opportunity to try and centre myself. It was working too, right up until I heard his rich baritones becoming strained while his deep octaves rose up a few notches. The harsh, authoritarian tone he was using while talking to the person called Montana indicated he was more than just unhappy with her. Whoever she was sure copying an earful, punctuated with a few profanities before he ended the conversation telling her to find another agency because she'd apparently broken the last straw. He slammed the receiver back down with enough force it made me jump in my seat. I remained silent while he forcefully threw himself against the back of his chair, rocking it back and forth, his brow creased with frustration while he absently apologised to me for his language. He was obviously deep in thought. He leaned one elbow on the arm of his chair and rested his chin on his middle finger with his thumb on his lower jaw, staring intently at me while his forefinger began to rhythmically tap gently on his lower lip. I was torn in that precise moment, alternating between watching the erotic tap of his fingertip on his lip that had me thinking about his mouth on me again, or trying to calm the increasing anxiety building up inside me while he stared at me with such focused intensity. He suddenly startled me when he rolled his chair away from his desk, grabbed the arms in each hand and boosted himself off his seat.
Come with me,
he demanded.